Hello, welcome to Lecture 1. So I'm going to try to be pre-recording all of these lectures for you to watch before class. So you should be watching these lectures before class. And typically I'm going to try to break them up into 20 to 30 minute segments. And hopefully that will help you kind of have the ability to watch them in chunks if that's what you prefer. So in the past, students have really liked the ability to stop and rewind lectures and kind of go over things that they might have missed. And so hopefully you'll find these useful as pre-recorded lectures versus something that we do in class. So the first lecture is going to be getting started on the command line. So in order to run Python, you have to be able to run it through the command line. You should become familiar how to navigate the command line. So there's two different ways to interact with the computer. One is a graphical user interface, and this is what you're familiar with. So I'm able to click on, apps, these little buttons, and by clicking on them with the mouse, I get the computer to do things. So I can open, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, all sorts of different programs that I might be interested in using. A command line interface does not use the mouse. Instead, it takes commands that you type into it. And so different computers have different way of doing these things. The original Unix computers only could use a command line interface. Linux machines, so there's a bunch of different types of operating systems for a Linux machine. Red Hat, for example, is one of them. Ubuntu is another common one. So these combine both graphical user interfaces, GUIs, with command line interfaces, CLIs. And so a Mac is also very useful this way. They redid the operating system so that it's also built the ability to go in between a command line interface and a GUI. And now the PCs, the Microsoft Windows, traditionally they're very anti Unix type environments, but nowadays Windows also includes the ability to use Linux kernels. So I'm not very familiar with PCs. I use Macs primarily, and honestly I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to purchase a Mac laptop. If you're interested at all in doing any sort of bioinformatics, data science, Macs are much easier than PCs to use for this. But you can use the Windows subsystem, so there's kind of some documentation for how to do this. So on a Mac, you want to use the terminal, and the same thing if you're running Linux, the terminal application. So the terminal application is typically a black box, and then there's a prompt with an underscore. So the prompt is this greater than sign, and then the underscore is the underline sign. So if you don't see this on your Mac, again, you can just use the spotlights. So you can either click on the magnifying glass, or you can use the open Apple space to open that up, and you can just search for terminal. And so you should find this application, and then you can simply add it to your dock by using the options. So now I have opened a terminal, and you should see something that looks like this. So in a different lecture, I kind of went over how to use OMyZSH, so I've installed OMyZSH on this computer, and so that's why my prompt looks something like this, but your prompt might look a little bit different, and that's okay. Everyone's computer prompts typically look a little bit different depending on what exactly they're running. But now we can type and enter commands to our computer. And so an example of a command is shown right here. So this is the prompt, and so prompts again can look different. In this case, the project's $ is the prompt. $signs are very commonly used as part of the prompt. So this is not something that you type. This is something that the terminal returns to you. So you can hit enter, and so enter, I didn't enter any sort of command, so the terminal accepts that and basically does nothing, and then it prints out the prompt again. We can also enter commands, so there are a large number of different commands that we can use. In this case, Remove is the command. So the first word that you enter is the name of the command that you want to run. So remove, and then the command can take a number of arguments. So command, think about it with command as kind of like a program. So, I can run Microsoft Word and I tell the computer run Microsoft Word. So by clicking on this, I run on it. By typing it, these are kind of like much smaller versions of Microsoft Words, but they're kind of like programs that can do things, and they also can accept arguments. So you might want to say like Microsoft Word, open this file, so I can tell remove. So remove is a command that actually removes a file and deletes it. So remove takes in an argument. So an argument might be the name of the file. So if you had a file called foo.txt, you could remove it. And it also takes arguments as well, options as well. So options are typically given by a dash sign. So either a dash or a double dash are different arguments. This is probably very confusing if you've never seen this before, but you get used to it just by using it a bunch. So let's see what a command is. So one example of this is the pwd. And so pwd prints the working directory. So this is the current location that we are, the current directory where we are. So we are currently in our home directory, which is users and then the name of the login. So my login is called Python class on this computer. We can list, for example, list directories. So ls is the command that we use to list files and directories in our current location. So right now we are in the home directory, and we can see there's a bunch of folders within this: applications, desktop, documents, downloads, Dropbox. So I've installed Dropbox on this computer. So this is the location, the default location of where Dropbox installs its folder to store all the data: library, movies, music, pictures, public, etc. So, ls is a command, so if I don't give it any options or arguments, it's still able to do something. So some commands don't require any sort of additional information to do it. Some only work if you provide it with it. ls is an example too of something that has optional options and optional arguments. So if you wanted to, for example, list all of the files within the current directory that start with a capital D, you can do that by supplying it with this argument. So D star, so star is a wildcard character that kind of says match anything else. So if it starts with a D and then anything else, print it out. And since this is the first time I'm accessing this, I have to give it permission in order to see it. So this now lists, so by supplying it with this command, this now lists all of the directories that have this, that are within this directory that starts with a capital D, and then it also indicates the directories within that. So this is an example of how I can use an argument to modify how a command works. You can also add a flag. So if I do the -L, you'll notice that there's a difference in how it prints out. So -L changes how it prints out the information about the directory. So without this -L flag, it's called a flag or an option. It just prints it in a very compact way. Each directory and file is listed, and it kind of tries to print as many on a single line as possible. So now I've changed it so that each directory or file is listed as a single line, and you'll also notice that there's other information as well. So this first set right here is kind of permission information. So this tells you who on the computer can access this file, who can read the file, who can modify the file, who can execute the file. And then this is the owner of the file. So if you are on a computer that has different users, the different users can own a file. This will probably be a little bit confusing. This is the size of the file. So directories are, just basically links, so they're very small. And then this is the last time it was modified, and then this is the name of the directory. So there's all sorts of different arguments and flags that you can supply to a command typically, and the only way to kind of learn how to use that is just to use it and kind of Google or go to the help page in order to see kind of what's it all about. So we are currently within the home directory, so the default is that you always open in the home directory. And you can also move around. So let's say I wanted to move to the desktop, then I can just use the cd command. So the cd command takes an argument that specifies where I want to go. So now I'm in the desktop directory and there's currently nothing on my desktop. If I want to go back up a directory, I use the double dots. So cd double dots goes up and now I'm back into my home directory. I could also go into the opt directory, and now I see that there is a directory within here called miniconda. So if I've already, and you should have already installed Conda on your computer, and one of the default places that it installs miniconda is in this directory called opt in your home directory. So I can also go into this miniconda and kind of see what's in here. And so you see there's a bunch more files and directories. So one of the things that's nice about OhmyZSH is that it color codes things depending on what they are. And so you can see directories are colored in blue, and then text files, just normal files, are colored in white. So we can see so we can see that there's a bunch of directories within here, and then there's also a file called license.txt. So we can use more as a command. And so, this is just a text file that contains information about the license agreement. We can also go into these directories, etc., and then ls and kind of list to see what there is. We can go back a directory and then ls to see what it is, packages, so on and so forth. So, the Anaconda or Miniconda, depending on what you installs a ton of different files that are necessary for either running Python or creating the environments that you might want to create for this. So if you ever want to go back to your home directory, there's kind of two ways to do that. You can either just type cd, and if you don't supply an argument to the cd command, it automatically goes back to your home directory. And we can see that because this tilde indicates that you're in your home directory. Another way to do it is to put the tilde in, and then the tilde will take you back to your home directory. You can also use commands to create new folders or new files. So to create a new folder or directory, you would use this make directory command. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the desktop. Currently there's nothing in this desktop, but if we use the make directory, we can create something called, let's call it temp. And so now we see there's a directory within here called temp. And lo and behold, since the desktop is all of the files that are on the desktop, we see this folder also kind of magically appear. So this is a GUI way to interact with temp. So we can open it by double clicking on it. This is how we use the GUI to interact with temp, or we can interact with it on the command line. So now we are within temp because we just changed directory into it, and we can see what's in there, which is currently nothing. If we want to remove temp, we can use the rm, but we're actually going to get an error, and that's because temp is a directory. So this is a safety feature. Remove doesn't want to remove a directory unless you know and you're sure you want to remove the directory, because it's going to delete everything that's within there. So in order to use this, you have to use a flag. So the -r flag is, the R stands for recursive, and this tells it delete the directory and everything in it. And so now we see that is gone, and it's also disappeared from the desktop as well. Copy, so let's make a directory again, and let's say we wanted to copy that directory. So copy is an example of a command that takes two arguments, So you have to give it the name of the file or directory you want to create, and then you also need to give it the name of the file or directory you want to copy, and then the second argument is the name of the file or directory that you want to rename it to. So again, we get this error, and that's because these commands do not want to copy directories and everything in it unless they're sure it's what you want to do. So you kind of have to supply this recursive flag again, and so now we see, okay, there's a temp, and now there's a temp2. So we managed to copy that directory as well. We can also rename a directory with the MV. So MV stands for move. So this moves a file around, so we can either move it to a different location. So let's say we wanted to take the temp2 and we wanted to move this directory into the temp folder. So for example, we can do that. So we just supplied it with 2 arguments again, the name of the directory we want to move, and then the name of the directory we want to move it to. And so, we can see that we open it up, and now lo and behold, there is a directory within here. And we can see that on the command line, we can change directory into it, and now we can see it. Let's say we wanted to move this back, so we can move temp2, and then we wanted to move it up a level. So the way we always do that is that we just use these double dots in order to move it up a level. So lo and behold, we see it again on the desktop. And now if we go back, we can see both of those folders within there. If you just wanted to create a text file, you can do that using the touch command. So the touch.temp, and now, so you see this file magically appear. And if we open it up with TextEdit, which is just the default text editor on my computer, we can see that it's a completely empty file. But we can modify it on here, save it, and then that will also be saved in there. So more is a command that allows you to look at a text file, and so we can see those changes are saved right there. So there are also a couple commands that we'll get to in a little bit, which and echo, and you'll see kind of what these do as well. If you ever want information on a command, the man command is something that gives you information about a different command. So it's kind of like the help feature, so the manual. So ls is the name of the command, and we can see how it works. So it lists the directory contents. So these are all of the different flags that you can use. So we use the -l command in order to modify the settings. So I'm going to quit this by using Q. I'm not sure what exactly those errors mean. There's probably something wrong with my command line tools from my Xcode that I need to fix. But remember, we use this flag in order to change how it prints it out. And so all of the different flags that you can use, or the options that you can use, are listed right here. So this synopsis first lists the name of all of the different flags that we can use. And then you can see what each of these do. So this is the ampersand, display extended attribute keys and sizes and long output. So this probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but we can try it out. And so now we see kind of some additional information that is printed. The -a is another one. So -a prints what are called hidden files. So there are also some files that are included within a directory that typically aren't shown. .localize and .dstore are 2 of these hidden files. So usually these hidden files start with a dot, and they include things like configuration files, etc. So if you just use the ls command, they're not printed, but if you use the -a, for example, you see all of the hidden files, including the ... for example. So if this kind of like is how you go up a level. Your home directory will have a large number of these hidden files. So I have this .dropbox directory, .config, .trash, .omyzsh, .zsh sessions, etc., and then also a bunch of configuration files. So kind of the way it works is that these configuration files for different programs are stored in your home directory. So if you install Dropbox, for example, there's all sorts of configurations that it needs, and these are stored as .dropbox. So you can actually CD into these as well, and then kind of see what's in there. So there's all sorts of stuff that's specific to Dropbox that are within there. The shell that we're running, so we're running a ZSH shell. That is found, the configuration file, for example, is this .zshrc. And so you can see a bunch of configurations kind of within there. And then we also installed omyzsh. So there are configuration files that are stored within this directory as well. You can also combine multiple flags together. So now we list all of the files, including the hidden files, and we do this where each one is a single line and includes this other information like date, size, etc. So this is in bytes. The size of these files is in bytes. We've kind of combined it. You can also do it by combining the two letters. So each option only takes a single letter. And so if you combine them together, this is the same as doing this and this separately. So, you can see there's all sorts of options that you use. And kind of the only way, you kind of just have to read through these to see, if there's a specific thing that you want to, do, there might be an option already in the program to do this. So man is kind of a good way to read through this and just see what all the other options. You also might Google something and, I want to do this. I want to recursively list all the subdirectories, and most likely you'll find something that tells you what to do, and you'll see that these other flags are used. So let's see kind of what are some of the things you can do. All right, so Q, so if you want to ever get out of it, you just type Q, and then that will quit the manual page. So yikes. Let's do this on a different one. So if you want to recursively print every single thing, so if I want to see what's in desktop, I provide it with this -R flag. And so not only do I print what's in desktop, but I also print what's within the folders within desktop. So that's what recursive means. It goes within all of the folders in temp and temp2, and it also prints this out. And if there were folders within that, it would also print that within there. So again, we can just move temp2 into that, and we can move the temp.txt into there as well. So here I'm just specifying move this file right here into this directory. And so now if I run this again, so the way I'm actually getting to these other commands is I'm just using the up arrow, and see that within desktop there's this folder called temp. Within temp there is a directory called temp2 and temp.txt, and then there's also a directory within temp called temp2, and there's nothing within that. So this list right here are kind of what gets you started, but by no means are these the only commands that you're going to use. So if you're just getting used to the command line interface, you should definitely read and try to use these as much as possible and get comfortable with using these as much as possible. You're going to have to memorize these commands, so you don't want to constantly be looking up, what is that command that does this? So eventually you're just going to have to memorize these, and then these will help you move around and get around. But there's also all sorts of tools that are very useful, like grep, cut, awk, etc. And these are kind of more complex commands that you'll start to use once your skills, your command line skills become higher. But we will cover these later in the class. So that is kind of an introduction to the command line interface and how you use commands in order to kind of do things. So we've seen how you use commands to move around within different directories. We've seen how you use commands in order to create directories, to move directories, to remove directories, to create files, etc. And so next we will cover what exactly a file directory is.